Hey guys, it's Neil, and today we're going to take a deeper look at Symphonic Destruction's Braam Designer. If you haven't used it, it's quite satisfying if you like those heavy, impactful tonal hits and effects. So we can do a quick rundown on the factory presets, and then take a deeper dive into customizing these already cool, complex sounds. I'll show you guys the elements, and how we can mix and match them to create new combinations, as well as doing a deeper dive into the effects engine in Symphonic Destruction to really make these sound unique. One more thing to mention is part of the versatility of these sounds is that we didn't just mix them to stereo as one big Braam and you were done. Instead, we have three different categories. So we've got subs, mids, and tails. And there's 3 banks of subs, 3 banks of mids, and 3 banks of tails. So there's a lot of mixing and matching we can do. And then you add in the effects and the tweaking, and you can really create some super cool stuff with this. So why don't we just take a look and get into it. So if you open designers, you'll see there are 3 different designers. We're interested in the Braam Designer. So let me drag that over, and boom. The first init preset or snapshot here under factory is Braam Full. So let's quickly go through this. If you haven't checked this out, at least this will be sort of a quick tutorial on it. Down here on C1 to B1 are the actual designer keys. And effectively, we're just assigning whatever's in bank 1, 2, and 3 to whatever key you want. That way you don't have to use 3 different fingers and 2 hands to hit whatever combination of, subs and mids and tails to get the sound that you want. They're basically like modifier keys. So if I hit the first one, you're seeing it's triggering C, C, and C. C2, 3, and 4. C sharp. And so on. But you can change these. So if I wanted to click, that just changed the mid. And we could click on that. And so you heard the tail change there. So already we're just changing what the sub is, the mid and the tail, and it's completely changing the entire sound of, the impact and the general body of what this sounds like. There's a lot more you can do, and that's really what I want to get into for this tutorial. This is the vibe. Again, there are 3 different banks of subs, there are 3 banks of mids, and there are 3 banks of tails. So 12, 12, and 12 of each of those categories, and there's sort of an infinite number of combinations that you can do here to come up with some really cool Braams. You could have all subs, all mids, all tails. Now we're going to get into the fun stuff where I took this init factory full 01 preset and I made my own. So I want to go into user and I'm going to load in this one where it just says Neil version B. Version A didn't make the cut. This is definitely going to be louder because I have a lot of punish on and I have a lot of effects on. So I'm going to bring the volume down a bit and hit this. There's also mod wheel stuff happening. And that's a heck of a lot different. So you can see I'm hitting C1, which is the trigger key or the designer key, the modifier key. Instead of using C2 as my sub, I chose B2. And then I left C3 and C4. So that's all I changed with the actual source material for the Braams. But the effects are a different story, and that's really what we're going to cover. So if we go to Master Effects, we have Envelope, we've got EQ, Filter, Drive, Gate, and Space. Those effects work for each channel or bank. So the subs can have their own settings for all of these parameters the same. So if we just solo the sub, we're going to hear what's going on there. If we move the mod wheel, we see the envelope. Envelope moves a bit. It's pretty minimal. The EQ, there's another story. We've got like the Q changing, which is the width of the EQ. What's being cut is moving, and you're seeing a top and dip. So that's changing the sound, making it darker. And then over here, we have gate and space, and neither of those are actually in play for this particular preset, nor is distortion. So if we then go to the mids, we can take a look at those. So let's start off with the envelope for bank 2. Now, clearly the attack has been raised. Normally it would be here. And I think I had it about right there. So it fades in. Now if we add in the mod wheel, which is controlling this center knob, which we call our macro control, you can see things are moving, right? So interesting. There's a lot of other stuff going on here. So when we look at the drive, we have some settings set up, but we're not modulating them. They're stagnant. So the drive is cranked and the output is about 12 o'clock. If we go to the gate, some interesting stuff starts to happen. So let's pull this back. This mod wheel, you can tell by the aqua line, has some modulation happening with the amount. So as I push my mod wheel up, you're hearing the gate sort of bleed in and start to chop that note up. And then if we go to our third sound, which is a tail, I'll solo that. It's at a different rate. You can see the play bar is moving at a different rate. And if we click on that, we'll see the rate is a 16th. But the mod wheel, which is attached to the macro here, is also attached to that rate. So and that creates a really interesting effect, in my opinion. I think changing the rate, it sort of just amps up the excitement and the energy as you push it forward, which I really like. Let's look at some of the other parameters. So again, these effects have a lot of cool texture to them, so I didn't add any additional delay or reverb. If we look at drive, same thing there. Didn't want to go too overboard with the distortion or the filter. But what about the EQ, right? So we're on bank 3. So I'm cutting the low and the high and pushing the mid. So in addition to that gate effect happening when I push my mod wheel, we have the EQ changing, sort of shape-shifting, right, into a mid bump and the high and low being cut, which is kind of neat. And then again, the envelope on this, it's pretty gradual. So that attack is really, it's long, so it's coming in very slowly. And those are the things happening, you know, on the individual effects. If we go to the master effects, you're going to see punish is almost at 12 o'clock, adding a lot of gain and some heat to it. There's some master reverb on it, and I think that's sort of it. So next, let's take a different preset. We're going to go right to my user folder and pick up Braams 2 Full Neil. I did a similar thing. If we go and look at the designer and I hit C1 on my designer key, that sounds pretty funky, right? So I'm selecting D2 in my sub right here. C3 is what you'd expect to load in with the first preset, and then C4 with a tail. But the real story in this again is with the effects. So we go back to the master effects and we start taking a look at channel 1. Again, we have a long attack. The EQ on this one pretty radical there. Let's just solo the sub. It really takes the top off. You can see there's pretty interesting movement. We've got some crossover with the Q and the frequency, and I'm guessing there's some filter on that. So let's check that out. Yeah, it's shaving a lot of top end off, as well as the EQ sculpting. So let's check out the next bank, right? So mids 1, bank 2 mids 1. Our envelope is long again. So this was what I was going for, sort of this gradual lead in, like a swell. Big EQ shift there with the mod wheel. And the filter. It's already pretty pulled back, and this is just dipping it further. Let's look at channel 3, which is tails 2. We take a look at our envelope, which is, again, very similar to 1 and 2, with a long attack. And then the EQ on bank 3, we're really shaving a bunch of the top end off. And as we pull back, it normalizes to 0, and it gets darker as we push it. So let's take a look at the filter, and here you're seeing the inverse. With the EQ, when you push it up, you're dipping the top end out, and then with the filter, when you push that mod wheel up, you're losing it. There are some master effects going on here. So we've got punish up even further on this preset and no reverb. So again, to hear the whole thing together, all right, thanks everybody for watching this tips and tricks tutorial video for the Braam Designer in Symphonic Destruction. We covered how to use the individual effects on the subs, mids, and tails, and use the modulation to individually sort of tweak and move those effects around to really customize and make these sounds unique in your own. And as always, make sure you like this video and subscribe to our Heavyocity YouTube channel so you're in the know for all the latest and greatest information coming out of Heavyocity. Again, thanks for watching and take care.